we tend to think of the story of Noah and the person of Noah in a caricature kind of way, when in fact he probably is one of the greatest of the heroes of the faith. And what he faced was in many ways worse or more difficult or more complex than anybody else in Scripture except for Christ himself. Jesus mentions Noah. He loves Noah. He sees Noah as a real preacher to us in our generation of how we should live and the warnings if we don't live the way Noah lived. So let's take a look at him a little bit more in depth and understand about him. Why was he such a hero of the faith? And I want to just take a few seconds, if I can, and talk a little bit about the context of Noah. When Hebrews was written, it was written to Jewish believers, so they knew the story of Noah. And so in Hebrews, he gets one line, really, one sentence. But that's because they assume that you know the story. And I know that many of you do, but I think it's good just to go back and kind of understand why is he such a great hero of the faith and understand the context of when he lived and how that came about. So in Genesis chapter 6, it actually records the story of Noah and how it came about and what the circumstances were before he came on the scene and as he came in the scene. I want to read that. It says in Genesis chapter 6, and we're going to go from verse 5, the Lord saw how great humanity's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their heart was only evil all the time. The days in which Noah lived were very dark. They were very wicked, and wickedness is only increasing. And what the Bible means by that, to understand it, is that society was developing rapidly. Humanity had only been on the face of the earth for 1,000 or so years, and they were beginning to form towns, they were beginning to form cities, they were beginning to form empires. And they were moving further and further away from God, further and further from understanding righteousness and how to treat each other properly. And so these civilizations that were being built, these cities that were being built on the backs of people such as slaves, serfs, peasants, and at the very top was these very wealthy, and then everybody else was just oppressed. And it was very violent. Slavery by nature is a very, very violent thing, and God hates slavery. He hates empires that are built on the backs of ordinary people and oppress them, and they use violence to get what they want. You know, we think about places like United States of America or places like the Mayan culture or the Aztec culture. These are all cultures that were built on slavery, and it's just plain wicked, and God hates it. And so what had happened is when God had designed the earth where people would be able to relate to each other with respect and honor, suddenly we're finding a situation where people are really beating up on each other and hating each other and destroying each other to get what they want, taking advantage. So this is the first thing about Noah. He knows what's right. He knows the right way that people should live. He knows how God intended us to work with each other and have brotherly love towards each other, but everything in society around him. He's one of the few people left like this. People now are just filled with hatred towards each other, greed towards each other, oppressing each other, and living for their own selfish desires to have wealth, to have money, to have free sex, just all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So that's the first thing that's really difficult about Noah, and that's why he's often used in the Bible to actually warn people that if a society's starting to head that way, because societies do. And the prophets will often say, you're going into the days like Noah, where people were filled with all kinds of wickedness and impending judgment was about to come. So then we read on, and it says, the Lord was grieved that he had made humanity on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe out humanity, whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures and everything that moves on the ground, birds of the air, for I'm grieved that I have made them. This is a heavy passage, right? This is one of the heaviest passages in the Bible. God's saying that I'm going to wipe out everything and everyone. And I know we all find this passage hard. It's like, whoa, really? Is this the God we serve? But I want to remind you how much God hated what had happened. He hates injustice. He hates evil. And he just couldn't see any way to stop it other than to restart the whole thing over again. And, judgment comes. If societies become wicked, I don't want us to be fooled. Judgment does come. Like in the United States of America, when slavery was there and they were on the backs of people, slavery was terrible, man. They would whip people, they would cut people's limbs off to get them to do what they wanted so the rich could enjoy their life. Well, they ended up in a civil war. That's a judgment. Places like the Aztecs, who used to do human sacrifices, their whole society was wiped out. And it's partly, in a sense, a judgment because God does not tolerate this. And so this is when Noah was living. The darkness was there, and yet at the same time, he could see this judgment coming from God. And it was very, very traumatic. He went through a really, really traumatic thing where he was there when people were judged. He was there when the whole thing was wiped out. And believe me, he was not gleeful about it. It grieved him greatly that God came and had to judge people and that sin had got so bad on the face of the earth. So that's the context of Noah. But here's the thing that's amazing about it. For a normal person, all of that would have destroyed them or overwhelmed them. That's the truth of it, right? It's funny, even in this virus of corona, there are people, we had this terrible thing in Nova Scotia, and I'm not sure, we haven't been told whether it was related to this season, but we are seeing people mentally lose their ability to think, and there's been breakdowns, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and that's over this. Noah was through one of the most traumatic and awful situations on the face of the earth. Here's the thing. He didn't crumble. He didn't go down. He went through it. He was faithful to God. He didn't deny God. He didn't let go of God. He did exactly what God wanted him to do. And at the end of it, when he came through an incredibly harrowing experience, he comes out the other side and he received personally a covenantal blessing from God. Rainbows were created for Noah. That's pretty awesome, right? It wasn't created for gay pride. It was invented for Noah as a sign that God's favor was upon him because he'd gone through an incredibly difficult testing by faith. And his name is remembered forever. And I think that's God's call for all of us. Whether it's to do with this season or whether it's to do life in general. Because, you may go through this season well, but there's going to be other seasons where you're going to face trauma just like Noah did. And God's call to all of us, he says, listen, I know you can get through this. Because if Noah could get through one of the most horrible situations ever to face the face of the earth for one individual ever to go through, and he could come out the other side and receive a blessing and a covenantal promise from the Almighty and prosper, surely you can do the same. God wants you to be and me to be people of faith, that we come out the other side of the situations we go through and actually we receive blessing and promise because we stood in faith through the whole thing. This is what God's got in store for all of us. Man, there are so many blessings, so many promises, so many wonderful things ahead of us, but sometimes we got to go through it. Notice Noah wasn't taken out of it. He had to go through it, but the promise was his. Wow. So how did he do it? That's what I really want to look at today. How did Noah stand in faith? And what is he teaching us about what it means to walk in faith in our lives in these days? The first thing about Noah, and this is true of all the heroes of the faith, is he was absolutely convinced, absolutely sure in the existence of a personal God who was interested in him. Okay? He had a conviction that there was a one God who was over all things, that he could have a relationship with, that he could know, and that was the core foundational truth in his life. God is real. And not just like small g, big G. God is real. And that's what we learn about him, and we learn about all of them actually. It says in Hebrews 11 verse 6, which is before the passage in Hebrews 11 verse 7. Let's read them together. Hebrews 11 verse 6 says, "And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek them." And then on to verse 7, "But by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear," I love that, built an ark to save his family. That's really important. "By his faith, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith." So the first verse says what faith is, and then the second verse, verse 7, explains how Noah lives it out. And it says there, it's impossible to please God. Anybody coming to God must believe that he is. And that's what we see working in Noah's life. Noah was blessed in this regard. If you follow the lineage of Noah, actually in chapter 5 of Genesis, it goes back about 12 generations, I think, or maybe 10, and it goes back to a man called Seth, who was the son of Adam and Eve. Just track with me, okay? If your brother's over on the couch somewhere else, throw a cushion at them to keep them with us. And if you're by yourself, then you hit yourself with a cushion as long as it's a fluffy, feathered-filled cushion. Just to stay with me on this, okay? I want you to follow how Noah came to believe in one God. His grandfather and grandfather and great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather all go back to Seth. And because they all lived to an old age, when Noah was born and a young man, he had a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a great-great-grandfather all around him. And Seth was righteous. Cain, his brother, ignored God, hated God, denied God. But Seth loved God, worshiped God. He knew who God was through his parents, Adam and Eve. And he passed that truth down to his children. And those children were Noah's grandparents and great-grandparents. And so Noah lived in a community of believers who taught him who God was. Whoa, I just think that's absolutely amazing. There's a lot about family in this passage. Noah not only saved himself, but saved his family as well. And the power of passing on the knowledge of God to our children and our children's children and our children's children's children is so important, right? We as parents have an obligation, have a duty to show the faith to our children, both in word and deed, that they also might come to that place of believing in the one true God and devoting their lives to serving Him. And that's why Noah had such a strong faith, because his lineage goes back to Seth and Adam and Eve, and he was surrounded by these patriarchs who trained him and taught him what it means to know God. Now, there's one thing I want to point out about that before we move on, and that's simply this. You may not have come from a Christian home. You may not have come from a place of really knowing who God is, or you came from a dry religion and it hasn't helped you at all. Here's the beauty of it. You can't be convinced about who God is by yourself. You have to have your eyes open. The Bible says sin, the nature of sin, not just a specific sin, but sin by nature, has closed your eyes. But when a person calls out to Jesus and says, Jesus, open my spiritual eyes. Jesus, take away my sin. Jesus, forgive me for my sins and let me see God. Jesus will come because of his work upon the cross. He has the power to do this, and he has the power to forgive sin. He has the power to open the eyes. He has the power to put faith, the knowledge of God, into your heart so that you would believe and that you would know that you know God exists. And if you don't know God today, you're not convinced, you can never come to be convinced about God by yourself. You need to call out to Jesus Christ and ask him to do it for you. That's why we love Alpha. Alpha is a way where you can go and begin to learn more about this and learn how to call upon the name of Jesus and let him bring you into relationship with the Father. Pretty amazing stuff, right? Noah got it through his parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, but you can get it directly from Christ, the Son of God. I love that. So that's one reason why Noah had such strong faith. He absolutely knew God existed. Everybody else was blind to that, and therefore it changed the way he thought. And then if you add on to that, not only did he believe God existed, secondly, he knew that he needed to live a life that pleased God. Okay, those two are really important. Oh, there's many people who believe in God in some form or shape, but they haven't moved to the second and more, maybe perhaps even more important part, that is seeking to live a life that pleases him. Oh, God exists. That's nice. Yeah, that's really nice. Oh, yeah, I believe in God. Yeah, I do too. That's great. Yeah, okay, let's go out. No. I believe in God, and if he is over all things, my purpose in life is to live in a way that pleases him and honors him, right? So that's what it says about faith here. Remember that passage I read? We'll read it again. verse 11 of Hebrews. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe he exists. That's what we've learned. And I've put it in capital letters on the board here. I'm going to show you right here. I even put it in orange. And this is really crucial, faith is not just believing in him, and you believe that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. In other words, he's watching, and those who please him, he brings covenantal blessings to them. And those by inference who ignore him and live in a life that is of their own doing without any awareness or a desire to follow him, there is a judgment that comes as a result of that. That's a hard thing in Scripture, but that is the truth of what God's Word teaches. We're called to be a people of faith, and that means we need to learn how to walk after God. And that's actually the first steps of faith, to be honest with you. People, before we get to building boats and going through storms, Noah lived to almost 1,000 years. His first 500 years of his life were actually devoted, before he even had children, were devoted to the task of learning how to walk with God, learning how to walk in a way that pleases God, right? And then once he learned how to walk, how to please God, then he was in a position to go on to even greater acts of faith, more incredible things in the faith. And what I mean by that is that in Noah's day, following God was not easy. Living a life that pleased God was not easy. Remember, he lived in a culture where people were anti-God. So for him to begin to do things like not cheating, not stealing, for him to do things like not worshiping other idols, for him to do things like honoring people and looking after the poor and the needy, for him to do things like taking time out every day to offer sacrifice and worship to God, I think the people around him as he grew up would have been seeking to stop him. Now, he was blessed because he lived in a community of faith, but he would have been in a place where people were trying to come against him and speak against him and ridicule him. And that ridicule he experienced when he was learning to walk in the ways that please God enabled him when he started to build a boat. Now imagine, when he began to build that boat, you imagine the ridicule he got then, okay? What the heck are you doing? God told you to do what? Noah, you're wasting all your money on this thing. You're going to have nothing. Noah, you're crazy, man. Don't build it so big. Maybe you do need to build a boat, but build it just for to go on a river cruise. Come on, Noah, what the heck? And even his own family, I think he probably would have, his wife might have said, Noah, what are you doing? His boys every day would have rolled their eyes when he said, come on, sons, let's go and build, and because we've got to get rid of it. And then even himself, is it really going to rain? We've never seen rain before because they'd never seen it before. I mean, this guy is living on the edge. He didn't get to that level of faith day one. He got to that level of faith because he learned how to walk in his life daily in a way that pleased God, and face the challenges on a daily basis of personal decisions that had a cost to them, had a weight to them. And as he learned to develop a daily habit of walking with God, then when the big times came, he had the internal fortitude to be able to take more faith and trust God in some very big steps, personalized steps that God wanted them to take. And I think that's true for us. Jesus made this statement. I love these words by Jesus, and you've heard them before. Very, very powerful statements about our lives. It says in Jesus, Matthew chapter 7, therefore anyone who hears the word of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house upon the rock. Jesus is saying, listen, Christianity, following me, is, yes, it's about believing that I am Lord and Savior, but it's also about taking my teachings and actually putting them into practice, living in a way that pleases me. I've told you how you're meant to live. He says, I told you not to have anger, not to have hatred, not to forgive. I've told you how to use your money for the kingdom of God. I've told you how to pray. I've told you how to fast. I expect you to do these things because having faith is not just about believing. Having faith is actually putting what I've taught into practice and actually making them the guiding mantra for your life. He says it's going to be like putting a house on rock. And here's the thing about putting a house on rock. When the floods came, like the floods of Noah, when the floods of life came, it won't get torn down because you've built your life. You've actually established the way you live on the Word. not on your own ideas. Here's the thing. If you're going to build on rock, it takes a lot more work. It really does. Because what you have to do is you actually have to dig holes in the rock so that you can put the foundation, you can put the poles in that stabilize the house. In sand, you can get a shovel, dig a hole, and you can do it in a few hours. In rock, you got to chisel it out. To establish your life on Christ, it takes time. It takes time like building an ark. It takes time. It takes years. And you have to be committed over time to learn God's ways and walk in them in a way that's pleasing. And when a person knows God and is walking in a way that is pleasing to God, my goodness me, doors are going to open. God is going to begin to do awesome things in your life because you are in a position to walk by faith. Because you got the fundamentals, the essentials worked out. And that was Noah. He was chosen by God because he had the essentials. Listen what it reads Noah in Genesis chapter 6, just to summarize his life. It says in Genesis 6, verse 8, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." And this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Okay, so he was righteous. He had a living spiritual walk with God. He was covered by the blood. He was blameless with other people. He had learned how to live in a way that was honoring and godly in the way he dealt with people and around him, just really pleasing to the Lord. And he walked faithfully with God. He wasn't coming to God and then disappearing for months at a time. No, daily he sought God and was with God. And because of that, when God came to judge, he said, Noah, I'm going to put favor on your life. I'm going to work in your life. And I want to encourage you in this season. You don't regret the past. Start to come closer to God than ever before. You're going to have to start sometime. Why not start now? Why not start on a daily basis, beginning to call out to God and beginning to walk with God and beginning to listen and pray and worship and beginning to allow God to change things in your life that need to be changed, where you're batting heads with people all the time. God says, I want you to get rid of that. I want you to be a person that pleases me in the way I live. When we do that, God is going to do awesome things in our lives, and we're setting ourselves up for the blessing to flow in a greater way. And that moves on to the third thing. Noah believed in God, and therefore Noah decided that he was going to live in a way that pleased God. And that was the core goal of his life, was to be pleasing to God and walk with God on a daily basis. As a result of that, in Hebrews it says, he was warned about things unseen. Woo! I love that. He was warned about things unseen. Did you get that? He was warned about things unseen. In other words, because he was righteous in God's eyes, and because he was walking with God, and because he pleased God, God began to open his eyes to see unseen things. And what he saw was impending judgment. What he saw was a flood coming. What he saw was he needs to build a huge boat. What he saw was God bringing the animals into that boat. He didn't get to see those things from ground zero. He was established in God, and then he began to see those things. Amazing. And this is what God does with us. As we draw close to God and we walk with God and we get the basics sorted out, I'm telling you, God begins to talk to us more and more. And I'm not talking about crazy voices in people's heads. I'm just saying, like when I lead this church and I'm walking in a way that's pleasing to God, I'm close to God, God just gives me ideas. I wouldn't even say God told me. I just say the Spirit of the Lord is flowing through me, and God has given me wisdom how to navigate this season, and my leadership team how to navigate this season. I've been distracted with something recently, and eventually we got over that issue, and I came back and was much more again flowing in the Spirit. And Pastor Landry said to me, Pastor, I'm glad you got over that hump. It's good to have you back. It's good to have you flowing in the Spirit again, because when you flow in the Spirit, we can see that God's opened your eyes to see the unseen. You don't look at this world the same way anymore. When you begin to see the unseen, when you look at situations, you look at them at a practical, ordinary level on one level, but on another level, your ears and eyes are open for God to reveal the unseen to you. Come on, there are so many things in our lives. Some of you are getting into relationships. You cannot look at these relationships with natural eyes. You need to allow God to open the unseen eyes to discern behind the scenes. Some of you are facing critical financial issues. God wants to open your eyes to be able to see the unseen and see the future. Some of the situations you're facing, you think are for your destruction, but I want to tell you, if you can see by faith what God has got in store and allow Him to open your eyes in there, you're going to realize that though you will go through a flood right right now. In the days to come, you're going to come to another resting spot. That ark was moved way down from in the bottom of the valley, and it was moved way up into the mountains. You're going to come into a new resting spot in God, and doors are going to open, and there's going to be favor upon your life. God wants us to be a prophetic people whose eyes have been opened. And some of us were so discouraged because our eyes down here. But if we walk with God, our eyes get and please God. Our eyes get lifted up, and we begin to see the impossible becoming possible because that's the God we serve. Whew! He's an amazing example of a man who went through absolute horrendous times. But because he saw the unseen, and then he went ahead and acted upon it, he acted out upon it, God blessed him in a tremendous way. And in fact, he saved the human race. That's a pretty big deal when you think about it. I just feel today that God is wanting to stir us all up. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm too far behind. You're not too far behind. It's never too late to continue to stir up yourself, to seek God and put God first and begin to make some changes in your decision. You know what's right and you know what's wrong, and begin to make deliberate choices to be pleasing to God. And as you make more and more of those deliberate choices to pleasing God, the more and more the unseen will become seen. The more and more you will discern the right way to move forward. And it's always just a prayer away. Jesus, it's always just a prayer away. I'm pumped. I'm excited. I believe God's doing a revolutionary work in many of our lives. And He wants to open our eyes. And He wants us to get into a position where He can open our eyes. Our role is to make that step forward, to begin to make some changes in our lives. And God will meet us. He will begin to work. As soon as He sees us calling out, He'll come and work in there. There's so many amazing things He's going to store. Some of you feel so low, but God wants to open your eyes to see the unseen, to see the impossible becoming possible. Oh, I just feel it so strong in my spirit. Do not get downcast. Do not get discouraged. God is coming, and He will rectify and work in that situation. He's going to open your eyes to the impossible.